Ottawa is facing a big question. Will it let a foreign buyer snap up Teck Resources, one of Canada's last big mining companies? Now, if this was a few years ago, yeah, probably, sure. But now?
Critical minerals are at the center of major geopolitical conflict. And we need to hold on to whatever control we have if we have any hope of standing up for Canadian interests against the big beasts in the room.
So is Canada still open for business? We could soon find out. Hi, I'm Paul Haberstrood. Welcome to The Cost of Living. Canada's only blocked one big foreign takeover deal like this ever in 40 years. So how much has the world changed, even in the last few months? Well, Teck could be a litmus test. Also today, Canadian wines are doing something they've wanted to do forever. They're gobbling up market share in Canada. And guess who they have to thank? Up first, a break glass in case of emergency idea to goose the economy. So, Danielle Nerman, Ottawa is looking at all kinds of ways to boost the economy. It wants to improve productivity. It wants to nurture innovation. But those aren't the only things on its big list of things to do. It also wants to review Canada's corporate tax policy.
And I'm glad we're talking about taxes because it means I get to play this.
Max is talking taxes. Hey, have I kept you awake?
For the things your town may need. For the things the country lacks.
So our roads will have no cracks.
Schoolhouse Rock?
Yes.
I think you're dating us. Do the kids even know Schoolhouse Rock?
Well, they should. Pay your taxes and the roads get fixed. Taxman Max, he makes it all pretty clear.
Well, sure he does. And now we have Taxman Mark Carney. He's promising to look at taxes because
of competitiveness, as in Canada needs to make sure we're competitive with other countries. Mostly the U.S., but really everywhere. It's pretty straightforward. If our corporate taxes are too high, then companies might go somewhere else.
Now, this kind of tax review is something businesses have wanted forever because they love the idea of lower taxes.
And right now, the pressure is on because Canada's economy is kind of meh. Productivity is low. Business investment numbers don't look great.
And then, of course, you have Trump, tariffs, and the thinking in some quarters is, hey, Canada may need to make some moves here.
Yeah, that's what Adam Legge thinks. He's the president of the Business Council of Alberta.
We're losing our edge, if we even really had one, just due to some of the tax cuts that President Trump has been making. So it's time for Canada to really roll up its sleeves and figure out how we can be more competitive, not only with the U.S., but globally.
Okay, he's saying Canada needs to be more competitive. Where are we at?
Well, before Trump, our combined federal and provincial corporate rate was lower than the combined U.S. average. But Trump cut the federal rate in his first term and just locked it in his big, beautiful bill. Now, the average in the U.S. is about 0.5% lower than ours.
Okay, that's how we stack up against America, but we're also in a global world. Canada is competing against every other country. We're trying to make sure businesses come here, set up shop, and not go somewhere else.
That's the game that every country is playing, and we're all trying to win. And this has some people in Canada looking around and saying, hey, maybe we should look at Ireland and take a page from its economic playbook.
Ireland? Okay, we're going to take a page from them. Which one?
The one on big, bold tax reform. About 30 years ago, Ireland cut its corporate tax rate from 36% to 12.5%.
Well, that's not a cut. That's like a slash.
Yeah. And after they did that, a bunch of multinational companies were like, hello, Ireland. Big American firms that wanted access to the EU market, they were like flies to honey. Susan Hayes-Culleton lives in Dublin. She's an economist and the host of a weekly business show. And today, when she looks out her office window,
Not very far away, I can see Microsoft, I can see Intel. I grew up in a part of Ireland called Cork, and that is where a lot of the pharmaceutical companies are. So Pfizer is there, Johnson & Johnson is there, Stryker is there, Eli Lilly
Apple,
is there.
Google, Meta, they all have offices, R&D labs, and manufacturing plants across Ireland.
And this kind of shift of companies moving to Ireland is why they were called the Celtic Tiger.
Yeah, I mean, tax reform transformed Ireland's economy. The country was very slow to modernize. Like, up until the 70s, its main industry was still farming. Even after it joined the EU, Susan says there was high unemployment and emigration.
There simply wasn't a sense of hope, I suppose, in Ireland. There was a sense that in order to build a career or an exciting set of career prospects, you needed to go.
But now there is hope, and she credits taxes?
Well, she says the country has a lot of other stuff going for it too, like a highly skilled workforce. And that's pretty attractive to American tech companies. Today, Ireland no longer has the lowest corporate tax rate in the EU, but it was the first to lower it.
So they got the first mover advantage, which is important. You get people in the door, and that's kind of sticky. It's hard to leave. Companies aren't inclined to leave. So Ireland rolled out the welcome mat, and companies came.
Yeah, economists call this industrialization by invitation.
Were they nice embroidered invites, like in nice envelopes? Hey, big international companies, move here. We'll make it sweet for you.
I think it was a postcard. But it worked. Companies came and they pulled Ireland's economy up with them. The country has gone from being one of the poorest in the EU to one of the wealthiest. And Susan says that wealth does get spread around.
I definitely think corporation tax and the presence of foreign direct investment has trickled down. It's been more than a trickle as well. I mean, the reality is that by bringing companies here and obviously encouraging them to pay tax here is you're also bringing their capital investment. You're also bringing their ongoing spend in terms of wages.
In Ireland, foreign firms employ more than 20% of the workforce, and there's a lot of high-paying jobs in tech and pharma. We're talking six-figure salaries. Adam Legge with the Business Council of Alberta says Canada could learn something from that.
If we want to be the most successful and vibrant economy in the G7, as the Prime Minister has set the ambition to do, we need to seriously look at our tax competitiveness, and I would argue that it should be against the Americans, and calibrate it to that.
Okay, so we can compete with the Americans. We can compete with other countries. We can make some drastic moves to overhaul our tax policy. But Danielle, even if we do all that, it's not exactly like we're stealing Google and Apple from Silicon Valley.
No, not likely. Those companies are firmly planted in California. Even Adam says the chances of them moving their headquarters to Canada is slim. But he says we don't have to go after the Googles.
But if there are companies in Europe or in Asia or South America that are looking to put a location or an office or an operation in North America, and they're comparing the U.S. and Canada, we want to be on the consideration list.
Sure, but how much would we have to give to get on that list?
Well, this is where the plan could fall apart. Trevor Toome is an economist at the University of Calgary. He says if we lowered our combined corporate taxes, federal and provincial, who's to say other countries won't drop theirs?
If everyone's competing on reducing tax rate, there might be this race to the bottom, if you will, that overall doesn't lead the whole of all of the countries to be doing any better.
Yeah, there's a real bigger-than-neighbor quality to competing on taxes. You give up too much when it comes to taxes, you give up too many incentives, and this can get really expensive, and it means you need to attract a lot of companies to make it worthwhile.
Yeah, Trevor has looked at that. He's written about Ireland's strategy and whether there's something Canada can take from it. He says we could lower corporate taxes or offer other incentives, but if we follow the Irish model, it means we'd also have to increase our consumption taxes. That's what Ireland did. Sales tax there on things like clothes and drinks at a pub, 23%.
That is a long way from 5% GST or even 15% HST.
Yeah, Ireland's strategy definitely shifts more of the tax burden to consumers. But Trevor and a lot of other economists like consumption taxes. He says they tend to be more growth promoting and economically efficient.
When you're taxing consumption, you're not taxing investment. what you're doing is taxing how people are using returns from investment and work in order to purchase goods and services.
But consumption taxes, Danielle, they can be a tough sell. You'll remember Brian Mulrooney when he brought in the GST. Took some heat.
Oh, do I ever? I was a teenager and my Slurpee price went up.
Right?
No.
Messed with your Slurpees. All right, but where does Trevor come down on this? Does he think we need to slash corporate taxes here, offer other incentives, really try to become the Arctic tiger?
I don't think Trevor would go as far as to call Canada the next Arctic tiger because we're not Ireland. We share similarities, but Canada's economy is a lot more diverse than Ireland. We've got oil and gas, lumber. We build cars here. So we don't have to be as drastic. But Trevor does say simplifying and lowering taxes is one tool we have.
It's a tool, but it's also a risky one because we would potentially be gambling with our current corporate tax base.
Yes, but Ireland took that chance and it worked out for them. Today, corporate taxes cover the entire cost of education and healthcare over there. And Susan Hayes-Culleton, she's pretty glad her country took that risk. She says Ireland is rich, and not just corporate tax revenue rich with opportunity. Susan says students can intern at big tech companies and score good-paying jobs after graduation. Like, when she thinks back to her grandparents, they couldn't have dreamed of this.
If I could sit my granddad or my granny here beside me and tell them about this, I would say they would think that I was born into an extraordinarily fortunate position, of which they'd be right.
That's a pretty happy Irish economist.
Funny you say that. She's actually known in Ireland as the positive economist.
Huh, well, Makushla. Thanks, Danielle.
You're welcome.
Here's the good news. Many things are tax deductible, which means their cost can be subtracted from the amount of income you'll be taxed on. Things like medicine, doctor bills, and supplies for your work. So keep those receipts.
This is The Cost of Living, where we always keep those receipts. I'm Paul Haberstrood. So how much stuff do you buy on autopilot? Yep, that's my brand. Yoink, into the cart. It can take years for a product to win that kind of loyalty. But as they say in marketing, all those years of hard work can also be lost in seconds. Just ask U.S. winemakers and Canadian wine drinkers.
As an American, Sarah Nelson has always loved California wines.
Pinot Noir, Chardonnays, also was interested in some of the more kind of like organic wines.
When she moved to Toronto, Sarah had no trouble finding her favorites. Then the trade war started, and Ontario pulled American wine from the shelves. So when a neighborhood shop hosted a tasting event of Canadian wines, Sarah decided to give them a try. And now?
There's a lot of really good Gamays in Ontario that I love. I think it's an excellent kind of summer wine.
Those California wines she once loved, they've been replaced with Chardonnays and Pinot Noirs from her own backyard.
It's really incredible, too, to be able to go to Niagara, go to Prince Edward County, and going to some of these smaller vineyards and tasting some of these smaller producers' wines right where they're growing the grapes or where they're producing the wines.
The U.S. booze ban has been very good for the Canadian wine business.
We have doubled our sales from last year in the last 6 months, and we're expecting to double them again based on the orders that we now have in place.
Carolyn Hurst co-owns Westcott Vineyards, a small craft winery in Niagara. She says the Buy Canadian movement has benefited the entire region.
In the neighborhood that I live here with all the vineyards around me, and they're buying tanks, they're hiring people, they're making more wine. Every dollar that's being spent as a result of this increase in people buying local is all going right back into our economy.
Sales of wine made from Ontario-grown grapes have increased by more than 75% since March. In Quebec, they've jumped by 58%. Rob Taylor, he wants to build on that momentum. He's with Wine Growers Canada. He says the industry is worth billions of dollars to the economy and has the potential to be even bigger.
every other wine-producing country in the world, the domestic wines dominate the domestic market. And in Canada, like I said, we're still fledgling. Between our 100% Canadian and our blends, we're still less than 30% of total sales.
But persuading Canadians to change their wine buying habits for good? Rob knows that will take some work.
We've suggested that there be a Team Canada promotion of Canadian quality products, that we continue to not only promote the quality, but also the economic importance of Canadian products to Canadians.
But people have to be able to find it. That starts with breaking down inter-provincial trade barriers.
One of the great things that we're hoping from all of this is that with these new trade agreements between the provinces is that you can go into downtown Toronto and be able to get an Okanagan Red or a Tidal Bay wine from Nova Scotia.
Sarah Nelson hasn't tried any Nova Scotia wines yet, but her tastes have changed, and she is not going back.
I don't miss the U.S. wines at all.
For The Cost of Living, I'm Leah Hendry.
What about you? Has Buy Canadian changed the way you're buying anything? Give us a call. Tell us what it is. Our number is 1-866-550-COST. That's 1-866-550-2678. Or send us an email, costofliving@cbc.ca. Coming up on next week's show, if you've looked at a fast food menu lately, you may have noticed it's not exactly the plain burgers and bland chicken of yesteryear.
I had 7 to 8 spicy chicken dishes. Did I finish them all? Absolutely not. But they got progressively spicier. So by the time we got to the last one, it was inedible. It was just spice. It was literally just whatever the spice powder they use. That's all I tasted. My mouth was on fire. I was running around the parking lot. I could see strangers coming out of their cars very concerned for me. It was an experience.
No, that's spicy. Why have fast food joints leaned so far into hot? That's next week. On your radio and by podcast, this is The Cost of Living. I'm Paul Haberstrood. Not that long ago, Canada was open for business. Exports, imports, takeovers, capitalism for the win. A certain neighbor, let's call it Schlamerica, has us rethinking that. Now we're talking about building big things, protecting the domestic economy. So how serious are we about doing that? Well, we now have a test case. One of Canada's last big mining companies, Teck Resources, wants to sell to UK mining giant Anglo American. But they need to convince Ottawa it's a good deal for the country and pass something called the net benefits test. So will this takeover get a rubber stamp, or will Canada be more elbows up? Gus Van Harten is a law professor at York University. He's written several books on foreign investment in Canada. Gus, hi.
Hi, Paul.
So if we think about Teck's timing here, what has it stepped into trying to do this deal at this particular moment in time?
It's a pretty incredible time for it to be on the table because we have such uncertain geopolitics, and critical minerals are at the center of those politics, at least for a country like Canada.
Right, and now we have this takeover bid by Anglo American. It would need to pass something called the net benefits test. Can you explain sort of the different parts of that test, exactly what that is?
Yeah, the net benefit test allows for the federal government to review proposed takeovers of really big Canadian companies. So what happens is the federal government will examine the proposal for the takeover and then enter into a kind of backroom negotiation with the foreign company to get what are called undertakings, which are commitments to support the Canadian economy after the big Canadian company becomes foreign owned. And so those undertakings come from the Investment Canada Act's description of what it means to be of net benefit to Canada.
Well, yeah, that's great. You mentioned the Investment Canada Act. That's been around since 1985. In that time, only one deal has been rejected. It was in 2008. It was for the space division of McDonnell Dettweiler. You look at other deals, like for Canadian miners, you got Inco, Falconbridge, Alcan. All those deals were approved. Do you think anything would be different for Teck as it faces this takeover?
I think it will be different for Teck. Teck's one of the last ones left. It's not always bad to have foreign ownership of Canadian companies, certainly not. Foreign investment is very important. But when you lose so much of a key sector, you just limit your options as a country. And if they let go of Teck, then they're really sending a strong signal of weakness in terms of Canada's ability to navigate the harshities of this unwinding of globalization and this assertion of a new nationalism by major countries, most importantly, of course, the United States. And we just don't really know where that's going. So why give up the leverage that we still hold, the cards we still hold? Canada being a resource-rich country, this is one of the few geopolitical tools we have to leverage against all the threats that have rained down upon us, whether economic, trade-related, or even potentially military threats. This is one of the few tools we have as at best a mid-sized country. And if we let go of it, then what are we saying to those who are on the other side of the table? We're saying we're not serious. We're not serious about using the tools we have and protecting the tools we have.
Okay, so Canada has stated its ambitions to be a world leader in critical minerals. We've said, look, this is a strategic resource. We have it here. It sounds like you're definitely saying this takeover doesn't necessarily mesh with those kinds of ambitions.
No, once you approve it, you give up a lot of your ability to shape that sector according to a Canadian plan. Once Anglo is in the picture with this ownership and control of many billions of dollars worth of critical minerals, then at a certain point, the Prime Minister of the UK just picks up the phone and calls the Prime Minister of Canada and says, hey, we don't like what you're doing. And that only happens because you have the foreign ownership in the picture. And we should not underestimate this. The phones get picked up all the time, and lots of decisions get shaped by that. And Canadian Prime Minister is just going to be in a weakened position if they don't have some Canadian ownership in key sectors that they can influence or even pressure, if necessary, to advance a Canadian interest.
So Industry Minister Melanie Joly is already saying Anglo-American will need to really commit to Canada, move the headquarters here, invest in job creation, do a bunch of other stuff. Do you have a sense of whether this is just kind of the standard tough talk in these kinds of situations, or given the context, might she be more serious?
I hope she's very serious and that they're leaning towards blocking this takeover, because I very much doubt that the undertakings on the table will be sufficient to make up for the loss of Canadian leverage if the takeover goes through. And I worry, though, that this is more of a kind of a superficial posturing, that they may not be serious in blocking the takeover. And because it's one of the few companies left, to me, that's very worrying. It would signal weakness to, the much larger countries we're tangling with right now, that we're just not serious about protecting critical minerals.
If someone was on the other side of you, Gus, and they said, no, got to let this deal go ahead, what's that argument? What has that argument been historically for Canada letting these kinds of takeovers happen?
Well, I think the thrust of the argument is the honest argument. It's good for the owners of the Canadian company, because they get a premium on their shares, and they make a ton of money. And that's sort of how the market works, right? Like private companies go out and try to make money, and when they're successful, they get big gains. Now, the whole vision of the Investment Canada Act is saying if the company is so big or the sector is so important, there are going to be some limits on the degree to which shareholders of the company can cash in, because there's a much bigger interest of the country as a whole. And that's the collision of values or interests that's really the basic issue here.
Okay, yeah, because if you look at Teck specifically, Teck has this big copper mine in South America. It's kind of turning into a money pit. Teck's worried about it. So it's saying this deal combining with a bigger company is the best thing for our financial future. Is it really fair for government to step in and say, no, you can't sell?
Is it fair to step in? Well, absolutely it's fair because the law gives the government that power and has for a long, long time. So anybody who owns a Canadian company, especially a large Canadian company that's over approximately $1.4 billion threshold for review and approval under the Investment Canada Act, should be well aware of that. So it's entirely fair. They might not like it. They might say this is going to hurt the company. But I think the government has to say that there's other ways to manage your company. You may have to shrink your company. But I can tell you the critical minerals you own in Canada are not going to be sold off to a foreign company. That's what the government, can say. And in this context, maybe 5 years ago, it would be different. But everybody can look around the world and say this is not the time to be giving up geopolitical leverage.
Well, it feels like a test not just for the mining sector, but I'm wondering if you think this is really a litmus test for Canada's approach to our own economic nationalism from here forward. Do you see it as that stark?
I think it's like we're very late in a process where Canadian economic nationalism has been buried. We're under a lot of soil now, but we still have opportunities to climb out. And it's not like we want to have to take a more economically nationalist approach. But if other countries force us to do that, we might as well. I mean, we just have to keep our options open. Critical minerals are at the center of major geopolitical conflict. And we need to hold on to whatever control we have in that field if we have any hope of standing up for Canadian interests against the big beasts in the room.
Well, Gus Van Harten, thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for reaching out.
That's all for the show. The Cost of Living is based in Calgary. The show is produced by Danielle Nerman, Leah Hendry, and Jennifer Keane, with help from Jeff Kynock. Oh, and if you have a minute to throw us a rating, even a review, I mean, far be it for me to pander for 5 stars, but you know what? 5 stars? Huh? Anyways, we'd appreciate it. I'm Paul Haberstrood. Thanks for listening.